Your brain literally gets addicted to toxic relationships. And I'm not speaking metaphorically here. Scientists have actually discovered that abusive relationships trigger the exact same neurological pathways as gambling addiction. The unpredictable cycle of cruelty followed by affection floods your brain with dopamine in a pattern so powerful that living feels physically impossible. And here's the part that will really mess with your head. This happens to everyone. Intelligence doesn't protect you, education doesn't save you, your brain doesn't care about your PhD or your promotion. When someone you love hurts you and then shows you kindness, your neural circuitry rewires itself to crave more of that exact pattern. So the next time someone asks, why didn't they just leave? Now you know it is the wrong question entirely. You've all seen it, a friend or a family member, maybe even ourselves, staying in a relationship that everyone else can see is toxic. And the question that always comes up is, why don't they just leave? But what if I told you that question reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of how human psychology actually works? Today we are diving deep into the science of why people stay in bad relationships, and I'm warning you right now, some of this research is going to make you very uncomfortable, because it turns out the same psychological traps that keeps people in abusive relationships, they are operating in your life too, just in ways you haven't noticed yet. We are going to explore three major psychological forces: the neurological addiction your brain develops, your childhood experiences set you up for this vulnerability, and why something called the sunk cost fallacy makes living feels impossible even when you know you should. By the end of this video, you will never look at relationship dynamics the same way again. Let's start with the most disturbing discovery: intermittent reinforcement. Picture this scenario. You're at a slot machine in Vegas. You put in $1 and nothing, another dollar and nothing, $5 more, nothing. Then suddenly jackpot lights flashing, coins pouring out. Your brain just got flooded with dopamine. Now here's the key. If that machine paid out every single time, you get bored and walk away. If it never paid out, you also walk away. But because it pays out unpredictably, sometimes after 2 tries, sometimes after 50, you become obsessed. You can't stop pulling that lever anymore. Toxic relationships work exactly the same way. Researcher Sahida Arabai discovered that abusers instinctively use what she calls intermittent reinforcement. They deliver rewards like affection, compliment, and gift sporadically and unpredictably throughout the abuse cycle. Cruelty for days, then suddenly flowers show up at your door, harsh silent treatment for weeks, then one perfect evening together. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a slot machine and a partner. It just knows unpredictable results or unpredictable rewards are irresistible. The pattern often starts with something called love bombing. It's an intense period where your partner seems absolutely perfect. They are calling constantly, buying gifts, talking about your future together. Your brain gets flooded with attachment hormones. You're on cloud 9. And the first incident happens. Maybe they lose their temper, maybe they are cruel for seemingly no reason. But then they are back to being amazing, apologizing, explaining, love bombing you all over again. And now you are hooked because your brain remembers that incredible high from the beginning and it desperately wants to get back there. So you start working harder and harder to earn those moments of affections back. Scientists call this trauma bonding. The rest of us call it hell. But here's what nobody talks about. How do you know if you are susceptible to this in the first place? The uncomfortable truth is that your relationship patterns were largely determined before you turned 5 years old. Researchers studying attachment theory have found that people who experience childhood trauma are significantly more likely to develop what they call insecure attachment styles. And these attachment styles make you vulnerable to staying in unhealthy relationships as adults. Let me break down these three main types. Anxious attachment develops when your caregivers were inconsistent. Sometimes they were loving and attentive, sometimes they were absent or harsh. Your childhood brain learned that love is uncertain and you have to work constantly to earn it. Sound familiar, right? As an adult, you become someone who craves validation and reassurance. You rather have some attention, even negative attention, than risk being abandoned completely. Avoidant attachments is the opposite strategy. If showing emotion or needing comfort led to rejection or punishment, your brain learns to shut down emotionally. You become numb to protect yourself. The problem here? Living a relationship requires emotional vulnerability. You have to feel the pain of loss, the fear of being alone, the grief of what could have been. If you spend your whole life avoiding those feelings, staying in a bad situation can actually feel safer. But the most devastating is disorganized attachment. This happens when your caregiver or your mother was both your source of comfort and your source of fear. Maybe they struggled with addiction, mental illness, or abuse, or were abusive themselves. Your developing brain couldn't make sense of it. The person who was supposed to protect you was also the person hurting you. So you learn that love and pain are inseparable. Now imagine that person as an adult meeting someone who treats them badly but occasionally shows them kindness. It doesn't feel wrong, it feels like home. And before you start thinking, well, I had a good childhood, this doesn't apply to me, remember that trauma doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's just emotional neglect. Sometimes it's parents who were physically present but emotionally unavailable. Sometimes it's being raised by people who were loving but deeply insecure themselves. The same brain that gets addicted to intermittent reinforcement is often a brain that learned very early that love is conditional, that love is unpredictable, that love is scarce. But even if you understand the neuroscience and recognize your attachment patterns, there is still one more psychological trap that keeps people stuck. It is called the sunk cost fallacy. You've probably heard of this in business context. It's when companies keep pouring money into a failing project because they've already invested so much that stopping feels like wasting everything they put in. Well, it turns out we do the exact same thing with relationship. Think about it. You've been with someone for 3 years, you've introduced them to your family, you've made plans together, you've supported them through difficult times, you've forgiven things you never thought you'd even forgive. And now you're supposed to just walk away. Let all that time, energy, and emotional investment mean nothing? No. Research shows that the longer people stay in unsatisfying relationships, the harder it becomes to leave. Not easier, because every additional day feels more like evidence that you should keep trying. But here is the twisted logic. You are essentially saying that because you've been unhappy for 2 years, you should continue being unhappy to justify those 2 years of unhappiness. When you put it like that, it sounds insane, but that is how the sunk cost fallacy works. It convinces us that past investment justifies future suffering, and abusers instinctively exploit this. They will remind you of the good times you've shared together. They will talk about everything you built together. They will make you feel like leaving would mean wasting your relationship, as if staying in something that is destroying you is somehow preserving it. But here is what the research actually shows. People who stay in unsatisfying relationships out of obligation experience lower levels of unhappiness, self-esteem, and life satisfaction. You are not preserving anything, you are just prolonging the damage. Now let's address the elephant in the room. You will ask yourself, but how do smart, successful, educated people end up in these situations too? Because intelligence doesn't protect you from survival mechanisms that are hardwired into your biology. Let's take this for instance. There is something called Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome is where hostages develop positive feelings towards their captors. It can happen to anyone. It is not a character flaw or a sign of weakness. It's an ancient survivor adaptation. When you are trapped in a threatening situation, your brain literally rewires itself to find ways to feel safe. Bonding with your captor increases your chances of survival, seeing them as human, finding reason to justify their behavior, or even developing genuine care for them. This embarks in your psychological programming. They are features to your PhD in chemistry. It doesn't override millions of years of evolution. The same mechanisms that kept our ancestors alive in genuinely life-threatening situations get triggered in abusive relationships. Your brain doesn't distinguish between I need to survive this kidnapping and I need to survive this marriage. It just knows adapt or die. And sometimes adaptations looks like finding reasons to stay, making excuses for behavior that would horrify you in any other context. Convincing yourself that things aren't really that bad and that you somehow deserve the treatment you are receiving. This isn't stupidity. This is your brain desperately trying to make sense of a situation that shouldn't make sense. So the next time you see someone staying in a relationship that seems obviously toxic, remember this. They are not staying because they are weak. They are not staying because they like being treated badly. They are not staying because they don't know better. They are staying because their brain has become neurologically addicted to an intermittent reinforcement pattern, because their childhood experiences told them that love is supposed to be complicated and painful, because every day they stay feels like more evidence that they should stay, and because ancient survival mechanisms are convincing them that adaptation is safer than escape. Understanding this doesn't make living easy. It does make staying a choice instead of an inevitability. The prison isn't locked from the outside. It's just that no one ever taught you where to find the key. If this video helped you understand relationship dynamics in a new way, or maybe helped you understand yourself in a new way, do me a favor and share it with someone who might need to see it. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for people we care about is help them realize that understanding their patterns is the first step towards changing them. And if you want to dive deeper into the psychology of human behavior, you know what to do. There is a lot more where this came from. Peace.